This is Dennis O'Malley, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Hello, good people. Thank you for tuning in to the Matt Balaker podcast. If you want to get on my good side, please click like, subscribe, and encourage at least 4 to 7 of your good friends to do the same thing. I'm really excited about today's guest. He's the most renowned Santa Clara alum, not named Steve Nash. He's a certified cool dad. He was chief operating officer of the parent company, a vertically integrated cannabis firm with revenues in excess of $170 million in 2021. He's one of my favorite people. Please welcome Dennis O'Malley to the program. How are you doing, Dennis?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Well, we've been, working to get you on for a long time. Our mutual friend, Ron Richards, recommended you. And so thank you, Ron. And then obviously we want to know how you got into the cannabis world. But before that, what was your first memories of being an entrepreneur? What kind of sticks out from your childhood?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of different things that probably stick out for the childhood entrepreneur and not. I think one of my first memories growing up. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I saw my dad worked for a soup kitchen, so he'd come home with a hairnet on his head, and my mom worked at a Firestone tire shop. And it was to see the amount of hours that they put in terms of what that meant, early on from a blue collar, neighborhood. It really sparked early on to be able to say, okay, what's out there? I think I was working and have had a job since I was in 5th grade. So I think I was delivering in Gaithersburg, Maryland, the Gaithersburg Gazette I think it was every other Wednesday as a 5th grader. And I used to make my mom drive me around and throw out in sleet and snow and rain and humidity the Gaithersburg Gazette, in an old beat up Audi pickup. So I think my earliest, memories was you got to work and you got to work hard. And I think in terms of entrepreneurship, slowly I saw people putting their own shingle up. And, very early on, I had a big respect for anybody who did that in any type of basis, whether it was a donut shop or whether it was a technology company. Starting something is hard, creating something's hard. And there's a lot of inertia and everything else that goes through it. So I still, to this day, anybody who's done their own thing and has hung their own shingle, I have the utmost respect for them because I know how challenging it is.
Hanging your shingle is not easy. But I want to rewind a little bit, Dennis, because, my 5th grader will occasionally clean the litter box for our cats, and that's about as industrious it is at the moment. You were a paper boy, essentially. Now, did your family move to Maryland, or did you just?
We did. We moved around a lot. My dad was in a labor union, and we moved down from Cleveland to California, then back over to Maryland, and back over to California. So,
wow. So you spanned the map at a very young age. What sticks out in terms of cultural differences, or just uprooting and then moving again? When you're in grade school.
It's one of those life lessons that you don't realize until you're far removed from it. But I think over a 4 or 5 year period, I think I went to 4 or 5 different schools. And so doing that, you got to make friends. And a lot of those schools, those friendships had been formed for 6, 7, 8 years previously. So the only way to go do it is actually go out there and meet people. And so I give a lot of credit to a lot of I give a lot of credit in terms of just the ability to be in sales and have a background in sales to what I had to do as a kid just to go make friends. My funny story is I asked my dad, and I think it was in 4th grade, and I said, "Dad, what do I do? I don't know any of these kids." And he said, just go up to them and go shake their hand and introduce yourself. And so I was the geeky kid who literally went to go do that. And everybody laughed at me going, "Who is this 4th grader shaking my hand and introducing himself with his full name? That's so weird." So needless to say, that tactic did not work in 4th grade.
being polite, making eye contact, and shaking
Yeah.
hands yeah. What did work? Like you obviously eventually made friends. What was the secret there?
Yeah, don't know. I think in the end of the day, you talk to enough people, you find other people that said, "Hey, wow, it's actually nice that somebody came up and spoke with me." So, I learned a lot and have a lot of empathy for those who are introverts. I'm not. There's my wife, but we've been raising one and learned how to go do that. But I think in the end of the day, just asking people some questions about themselves and just to talk with them, I think still works to somewhat break the ice.
So you have all the skills of being a podcast host. Just ask people about themselves and have follow up questions. So you're learning such valuable stuff as a grade schooler. Where did you finish high school, Dennis?
I finished high school at a all boys Jesuit high school in San Jose, California, called Bellarmine College Prep, and some of the I still have some of my best friends from those days, and was very fortunate to one get into the school, but this school we couldn't afford it. And they allowed me to do work scholarship on it. So my first step on campus was laying sod there, and I had so many hours to go do. They wouldn't even let me do PE. So when everybody else was doing PE, I was doing the janitorial work and the painting and everything else to be able to work it off. So, but I really do. I'm so grateful that I had that chance. I'm so grateful that there was ability to go do work scholarship there.
That's so. While the other kids are running tracks, you're cleaning the bathrooms. Just to kind of give some context.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was, I would do painting or you'd clean up some trash or something like that. But it was, there was a lot of hours, and there was a couple of us, who were doing that. And again, we we're just super grateful to have the opportunity to go do that. And they've been, kind of very generous, and it's been a huge impact in my life since.
Well, yeah, I mean, it instills a work ethic, and I need to take this opportunity to plug my book, Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story, because he went to Regis High in New York City, and it was a Jesuit school, and it's very different than traditional public schools. For people out there, Dennis, who are a little bit unfamiliar with Jesuit education, how would you compare and contrast it to a quote unquote normal high school?
I think there's really two things that stood out for me. Is one is there is a massive focus on academics,
Mhm.
and so it is a very well-rounded but very competitive academic institution and academic focus. So call it the love of learning is really taught, and it's a craft to be able to go through that. Two is we very early on were introduced to this notion of being a man for others, and service. And so throughout the time of Bellarmine, and it's hopefully carried on with all of our lives, is that we really learn to be men for others and to really have a focus on service. And that's been a great gift. And hopefully, I have three daughters. Hopefully, they're learning some of those same lessons.
Very, very cool. I'm confident they are. So you finish at a Jesuit high school, uh, and then you go to another Catholic school. Like Santa Clara's a Catholic school, right?
Santa Clara is also it's down the street, and it's another Jesuit education. But yeah, Jesuit University.
So what was your college experience like, Dennis?
Well, one, I went to Santa Clara University to go play football, and so that's really what I was mostly focused on. And Santa Clara at the time was a good Division II school, so it was a good balance of academics and sports. I was not a very good student in undergrad at all, so I was a lot more focused in other things other than studying. I had a degree in economics, and the short story of it is that I was on the last football team at Santa Clara. They cut the football program. I went to go play at Cal Poly for a while. That was another great school, and then finished back up at Santa Clara. And by the time I finished back up at Santa Clara, I somewhat realized that I had not taken advantage of the undergrad education that I should have, and knew that I needed to go get some work experience under me. But I also knew that if I was going to go do anything that I wanted to do, that's going to actually have to go back and get an MBA and actually get serious about it. So That's what I ended up doing. But in Santa Clara, again, some of the best friends that I've had, stem from that, and we definitely shared a lot of great memories and good times. But I did not take advantage of all the academic options that I should have back in those days.
You mean as a 21-year-old, you didn't take advantage of everything presented? Did you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
other interests or concerns?
Well, I'll tell you what changed for me was, in Santa Clara, I had, different jobs in college, right? I'd work for like a lumber company, and you'd be out, in the field, in the construction zones, estimating for fences at a company called Sierra Lumber that's, still out there today, and did that for a couple summers under a great guy named Jim Moblad. But it was when I was in Cal Poly, we went to what they called as a co-op. So it was a little bit more involved in an internship. But about 20 of us, we were juniors in college. We went to go work at IBM, and it was a full-on, full-time job. In 1993, they gave us an office, they gave us voicemail, and they gave us email. And so it was the first time any of us had seen email in 1993. Wow. But we had real jobs in terms of working in sourcing and procurement for IBM at their location in San Jose. And so that was really my first exposure to white collar work and what that meant. And we had, just a great group of people who, that cohort, so many people have done just really incredible things in terms of their careers. And again, just have had very close friends out of that. But that was my turning point that said, if I wanted to go actually do some knowledge work versus what I was doing out in a Sierra Lumber type of business, I better start taking these academic opportunities more seriously.
Yeah, well, you had the wherewithal to realize that, and I don't think I would have. I mean, you had this background where you had so many different jobs, and you finally got a white collar job, and some people love it and some people hate it. What was it about that environment that made you realize, all right, this is the path for me?
Yeah, I wasn't positive it was the path for me. I just knew that it was so foreign in terms of the lexicon being used and what people were doing, and I just knew that it wasn't something I was ever really exposed to growing up. And so I said, how do I prepare for this if that was something that I was going to go do? And so it was a lot of just feeling that I didn't have the skill set to go understand even this language and this world around what it looked like. And so that was the driver behind me just saying, look, I have to speak differently. I have to present differently. I have to think differently. And boy, there's a whole bunch of different concepts that, I got to learn if I'm going to survive in this business world. And here's where I think, business is. So that really drove me to, again, going back and getting my MBA. And it certainly helped with some of the jobs that I had after college.
Nice. Not long ago, Dennis, I got a survey from my MBA program asking what would we have done different, or what classes would you suggest? And I realized I don't think I had any sales training at my MBA program. It did classes on feasibility, evaluation, maybe communications, but I only learned it, and I'm learning it, a decade later. What recommendations would you have for altering or improving business school curriculum?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always thought the same. I always thought that in the end of the day, one of my mentors, a CEO called Tom Kelly, who ran Moxie Software, a very complicated software company. He sat us all down one time and just said, "Look, I'm going to break this down to you. It's this simple. We make, market, sell, and support software. And if we're not doing that, what else are we doing here?" And when you look at that in terms of the business curriculum in a lot of the business schools, there's a lot of tangential work that's done, but in the end of the day, the focus isn't as much on that core as you'd like, right? So how do you actually make products? Like what is product management, product marketing, product development? How do you actually market all of the ways to be able to market, whether it's digital, direct response? And there's a lot more focus on that, but some of the call it B2B selling has never been taught. in business school, and I think that has really influenced where a lot of people chose their careers. And a lot of people out of business school have this notion that says, I need to be a management consultant, or I need to be an investment banker, or I need to be a, something that is more reputable and more prestigious. But in the end of the day, 2, 3, 5, 10 years later, you look at some of the investment bankers, management consultants, and they're all transitioning out because they want to do sales. And so it's this interesting basis where you're right. There's not a lot of foundational sales work that it has been taught traditionally in either undergrad or grad, especially around B2B sales.
Right. And I think whether people like it or not, sales is a huge part of any career. I mean, you could sell a physical product, you could sell an intangible product, like if you're representing a school, for instance. And I like what you said about your father's advice. Look someone in the eye, shake their hand, and say your full name. Beyond that, what sales tips would you share for our audience?
Yeah, I used to provide sales seminars at a couple different an entrepreneurship groups here in Silicon Valley. And what I always used to lead off with is to tell people that I've never sold anything in my life, that I was a professional question asker and I was a professional listener. And I think, to me, that the notion of salespeople who show up and throw up, and the ones that actually drive content are the ones that are over time least successful. But when you have empathy where you actually want to solve people's problems, your whole goal in terms of a salesperson is to find the largest problem that they have and the biggest pain point, and to be able to provide them with a solution of that. It took me a while in my career, in my sales career, and I had two amazing bosses for the first two jobs, which was spanned 16 years. But I had a boss for 8 years in both places that were just some of the best sales coaches and teachers around. But it took me a while to understand that when you do that for somebody's career, you're doing that as much for their personal value as their business value. And when you're helping somebody succeed in their job and their career, they don't forget that. Right. And so many of my clients over the years, I'm still very good friends with, because I think they looked at that said, hey, my decision priority was what is best for the client, right? What's best for my company? And then the last thing was, what's in it for me? But I think salespeople generally get a worse reputation because that is inverted a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people view it as transactional, but your approach is more relational. You're helping them alleviate pain and basically make their lives better. And then in response, they're going to help you out in the future.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of close friends who are tremendously better and more successful salespeople than I am. And what I've always noticed with them is that their best clients are some of their best friends. And it's because they've really found, a purpose to be able to really make an impact on their professional and personal lives. And I've always admired that. And I think that's a great, it's a great point to be able to look at how important relationships are. And if you can blend those personal and professional lives, that's a pretty good life to lead.
Yeah, it makes work more enjoyable too. And I learned of you, Dennis, through your work at the parent company. Can you share with our audience what motivated you to get into the cannabis industry?
Sure. I think, in a lot of my career, I wish I could say that I had it all mapped out and I knew exactly what I was going to do. And, every step was calculated. But in reality, what I try to use as a guiding principle was, who do I trust and who are the people that I want to be surrounded by? And I had a technology company that I sold in 2016. It was a company called ReadyPulse to a company at that time called Experticity, now Expert Voice, and I worked with a great CEO there, Tom Stockham, who's amazing and good friend still today. But I had my original business partner and person I worked for at BR Printers, which on-demand printing company that's still around today. And he had real estate in the marijuana zone in San Jose and had started up a company called Caliva in 2015. In 2016, he'd asked me if I was interested in helping him out and joining. And at the time, I knew nothing about cannabis and what it looked like, and my wife had said, "Hey, go do what you want to do." And I thought that cannabis would be a good and a purposeful, somewhat mission, and then call it a high degree of difficulty, which was going to be a challenge to go after. And from day one and still to this day, I'm entirely humbled by the industry, by the plant, by how challenging it is. And I think anybody still in the industry and anybody in the industry, again, I have so much respect for, because it's such a challenge in any part of the different business. So that's how I originally got in, was being asked to join in to Caliva from an old business partner. And at the time, the company was, call it one dispensary, one store, that it had some accolades, a couple different grow rooms in San Jose. We grew that over 4 years, and we sold. I was CEO, and we sold the company to what was called the parent company, but that was through a SPAC transaction in January 15, 2021.
Yeah, and it wasn't just any run-of-the-mill SPAC transaction. There were some big names involved. Can you touch on that a bit?
Yeah, we were very fortunate early on, through Caliva, to have a lot of great interest. Our first investor was, Joe Montana. Carol Bartz, who was a great mentor to me, was our, chairman of the board and investor. We did a deal with Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z, at Caliva, and he really brought us to national attention and prominence. And then through that SPAC transaction, we ended up purchasing the 50% of that brand Monogram at the time, and then Rock Nation was also included on it. So it did have a tremendous amount of press and attention at the time, and we got very lucky when we went out to a SPAC. In terms of the timing, it was right when the Georgia election happened, and so there was a lot of optimism on it. But I certainly got a PhD in what goes wrong with SPACs, but most SPACs have had that happen as well. And then I departed from the parent company at I think it was March 2022. And then, but I've still been very active and involved, in the industry, and working with some just incredible clients over the last 2 years.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of important points, but what I want to highlight is some of the unique challenges of the cannabis business to folks who are outsiders. How would you describe some of the industry-specific challenges for the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I think the first basis of it that everybody in the industry can relate to is that most of the headlines that you always see is that this is a fast-growing growth industry, and actually most people outside of the industry who interview for a job in the industry, when I ask them why you get into it, they say, "Well, it's a growing industry." It depends on how you look at it. California, for instance, is actually in decline. So when you look at the legal industry in California today, it's actually going down, not up, in terms of the revenue and taxes that you see. That's partially because of the materials that are being made more efficiently year after year after year, so that pricing is declining. But it actually gets worse than that, because the number that you'll see doesn't reflect the number of necessarily new stores and new outlets there. So if you have a dispensary or a store in California today, you're going to have much more competition than you did 6 months ago or a year ago. And so by nature, that market share is getting divided up more than it has been. And you're also in a shrinking market. Now, that's a very California-centric story, given that California has been the oldest legalized program since 1996. What you see in other markets, and Missouri is a great example, is a market that just went to an adult use market. It's just crossed $1 billion mark, and you're seeing a tremendously profitable and healthy ecosystem where there hasn't been any type of illicit market or gray market or illegal market, for a long period of time. And so when you have those types of, ecosystems in some place like Missouri, it's a very helpful market. So the cannabis industry is really defined by both the state and the municipality. And there's some states and new states that are very, very attractive and very supportive. There are some like California that are going through turmoil. But you'll see even in states like Washington, I'm working with an incredible company that's founded by 3 founders that's growing tremendously and extremely profitable in one of the most competitive and oldest states in cannabis in Washington.
So there's so much variety. I think you touched on it. Like Washington is different from Missouri, which is different from California, which is different from Ohio, which is different from Illinois when it comes to like market dynamics. As someone, Dennis, who's been in the business for a long time, what regulatory changes would you like to see? And you can answer this on the state level, municipal level, or national level. What changes would you like to see if you could shake a magic wand and make it happen?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think you really need to look at it in all of the aspects that you just looked at. On a federal level, the most punitive economic barrier to cannabis companies is a federal tax law called 280E. And if you look at just the economics of your local dispensary store, it's an effective 13% net tax on your bottom line. So it's actually 21% of what your gross profit is, and if your gross profit is in a store that's 60%, it ends up being 13% of your bottom line. And so any other company that would be subject to that type of taxation would have a hard time surviving. So that does not make sense in terms of the industry today. It's a very archaic tax law. So on a federal basis, that to me is, I think, the number one basis that you need to be able to look at. On a state basis, I think there's 2 things. On a state basis, there is call it excise taxes that every state has put in because they had some type of prediction of how much taxation and how much revenue that the cannabis industry would go drive. In California, it's 15% tax. That's on top of a state tax. That's on top of a municipal tax. So those taxation basis, in addition to the 280 federal tax, again, is just punitive that allows an illegal and gray market to survive and makes it very different from a legal market to survive. And then lastly, it's the municipal level, and the municipal level also adds a tax, and it's anywhere between, call it 5 and 10%, but San Jose was 10%, taxation. And so when you look at this and you look at, call it San Jose as a good example, 10% taxation from the city, 15% taxation from the state, and then you have the 280E, which is an effective, net income 13% tax. So the effective tax rate, for both consumers and the businesses don't make a lot of sense. So that's really the basis that is holding up the illegal and gray market. That's on the economic side. On the social side, it makes no sense for any prisoner to be in prison or jail today for a non-violent cannabis offense. So we worked really hard at Caliva to be able to, help expunge records, provide legal services. And there was a lot of different municipalities who have been proactive at making sure that there's nobody in prison or jail for cannabis, nonviolent cannabis offenses. But unfortunately, in the federal system and in other states, that's just not true. And so I think that has to be rectified quickly. Out of the 2, I think it's the social and it's the releasing and expunging those who have had cannabis convictions is the right thing to do. And I hope the industry can coalesce around those 2 issues.
Here, here. Yeah. So, I mean, thank you for your work. But it kind of shows the challenges we have on both fronts. There's the regulatory, call it tax environment.
Yeah.
There's also, as you said, probably the more pressing and historically the more embarrassing criminality and kind of really ruining people's lives over something that we now see in a very different light. So what makes you keep going? I mean, it's easy to get kind of mired in pessimism. What motivates you to get up every day and stay in this business?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is that I've spent the last almost 8 years trying to be a student of cannabis and learning it, and I learn new things every day, and learn from the people around me every day. And I have, again, so much respect for those who have to be so innovative, so creative, and really grind through this industry. You're not going to find more passionate, more optimistic, more thicker skinned, professionals than you will in the cannabis industry. And whether it's the, Jen Chapins of Kikoko, who have been around since, before I got into cannabis, and is still driving a mission purpose, to drive great, healthy products for people to live, daily lives, to to the MFUs of the world who are going from Washington to Arizona to other states, and really providing some of the leading edge products for consumers. To be surrounded by that type of innovation and passion is inspiring. I'd say the second part about it is there's still massive challenges, in the industry, and because there's so many regulations, and because you're prohibited from working with a lot of the standardized, companies and systems. For instance, though there's many CRM systems out there, it's really hard if you're a B2B sales team to get the right CRM to work with you, and those types of things. And so things like that we're focusing on today is, how to modernize B2B, sales within cannabis. And how do you take that from, one salesperson knowing one buyer or bud tender, and how do you actually operationalize that so a sales manager or a CFO or a CEO can really understand the effectiveness of their outbound sales team?
Yeah, what are some ways, like, how is it modernized?
Yeah, it's not. I don't think that it's rocket science. It's really, in the end of the day, that you want to look. Most companies want to be able to understand and get a view of what is your pipeline. In this case, your legal licensed people to go sell to. What does that look like? Who are your sales people, agents, or partners, and what does their activity look like? What is their forecasted pipeline? But in the end of the day, cannabis has not had a system of record to be able to look at what a company is and have a really rich profile of what their customer, client is, and then have a rich profile of who that contact is. And so while in technology and other sectors, you would see programs like Marketo or Discover.org or Apollo and Jigsaw beforehand, you don't have those types of things in cannabis. And so I think building out a prospect intelligence database, building out a system of record for company information, building out what that collaborative contact list looks like, and tie that into, there's also a payment issue in cannabis, and just making sure that you have a collaborative environment to understand what your activities are to make sure that your clients pay you. Those types of systems just haven't existed. And so myself and my colleague, Hannah O'Brien, are really digging into that for a lot of our clients and trying to solve that as the next big challenge.
Very cool. Well, thank you, and thank Hannah as well. Dennis, what have you done in your career that you're most proud of?
So in my career, what I'm most proud of is probably hiring great people and seeing them succeed. And so I think there's two places where we had lightning in a bottle. One was at Gartner, where I was at for 8 years, and again learned from a guy named Pat Hoey as my boss there. The team that we built there and the success that they've had is quite impressive, and I love staying in touch with those teams that we had. And then I think probably the biggest achievement is creating something from nothing, and that was the company Ready Pulse that we had. And I had three great co-founders, Vinod, Srinivas, and Mahir. And we built that really from nothing, had lightning in a bottle, where it was really purpose driven. The clients loved our associates. The associates loved the company. We had a good mission, and really proud of, again, what people did in their careers and what my co-founders are currently doing. But that's really what I think is what I try to continue to look back and say, hey, where did we create something great, and how do we continue to go do that? And so trying to bring that into cannabis is something that still motivates me.
Very cool. And what are you most optimistic about?
So I think personally, I'm most optimistic about the next generation. I have 3 daughters. So I have a sophomore in Lafayette College. I have a freshman at Santa Clara University. My wife also went to Santa Clara, so we're very happy about that. And then I have an 8th grader. And the amount that they have in terms of coming out of COVID, just being positive on the world, but also just understanding that nothing's for granted. I mean, they really are there to get after it, and they're not taking anything for granted because they are outside with friends and there's opportunities. And so I'm really impressed with the resilience of that group. And I think though there will be, continued kind of impacts of what COVID had, I think the resilient muscle that they built is really impressive. And I'm really excited to see, that generation continue to make an impact.
Well, we're lucky to have that generation. So, Dennis, thank you for joining us. Where can people learn more about you, what you're up to?
Yeah, it's my contact info is just Dio at Ectray, so it's ECHTR.ai. But we're really undercover these days, and I'm available to reach out on LinkedIn. We're fortunate to be able to work with a couple 10 great clients across the country, and really focusing on a lot of what they're doing. But I'm happy to help anybody trying to get into space or start a company, those types of things. So I'm always happy to chat around that.
Well, we're happy you chatted with us, Dennis. Please come back soon. It was a great time having you, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Matt. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.